The Grand Chamber of the Galaxy Council was the largest structure ever built by any species. It floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a world called Kalos Prime. Inside, representatives from 30 different species sat in a circle of hovering platforms. Lights of blue and gold filled the air. The chamber smelled of recycled oxygen and alien perfumes. It was a place of power, and everyone inside knew it. High Arbiter Velos sat at the center, silver robes flowing around his thin body. He was Serati, a species known for their long necks and even longer memories. He had led the Galaxy Council for 200 years. In all that time, he had never seen anything like what was about to happen. The session was meant to be simple. Humanity had requested time to speak. This was normal. Humans always had something to say. They were a polite species, always smiling, always willing to talk. The galaxy had learned to expect certain things from them. Humans would complain about unfair trade deals. Humans would ask for better treatment of their colonies. And then, as always, humans would accept whatever small offering the council gave them and go home satisfied. That was how it had been for 300 years, Ambassador. Unipark walked into the chamber alone. She was a small woman with black hair tied behind her head. Her face showed nothing. No smile, no anger, nothing at all. She wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. In her hand, she carried a small data chip. Velos watched her approach the central podium. Something felt wrong. He had met Unipark many times over the years. She was known for her patience and her soft voice. But today her eyes were different. They looked through him, not at him. The chamber fell silent. 30 species waited for the human to speak. Unipark placed the data chip on the podium. The sound of it touching the surface echoed through the room. She looked up at the council, her gaze moving slowly from face to face. Velos felt a chill run through his body. In 200 years, no one had ever looked at him like that. Then she turned and walked away. No words. No explanation. Just silence. Counselor Thane of the Orvian Empire rose from his platform. He was a massive creature, covered in thick brown scales. His voice boomed across the chamber. What is the meaning of this? The human has not spoken. Velos raised his hand for calm. His hearts were beating too fast. He gestured to an aide, who retrieved the data chip and activated it. A holographic message appeared in the center of the chamber. It contained only text, written in the common language of the galaxy. The words were simple. Earth no longer recognizes the authority of the Galaxy Council. All treaties are void. Do not contact us. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Then the chamber exploded into chaos. Counselor Thane roared in disbelief. The Serati delegates began speaking rapidly among themselves. Smaller species retreated to the edges of the room, their eyes wide with fear. Velos slammed his staff against his platform, calling for order, but no one listened. Commander Brix, the military leader of the coalition forces, pushed his way to the center. He was Kathrania, a species built for war. His forearms were covered in old scars. This is a joke, he growled. The humans would never dare. They are weak. They have always been weak. But even as he spoke, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human ambassadors were leaving their posts. Human workers were abandoning their stations. Human ships were departing from ports in every sector, all heading in the same direction. Home, within 6 hours. Every human in coalition space had vanished. Velos sat in his private chambers that night, staring at the stars through his window. He tried to understand what had happened. For 3 centuries, humanity had been the galaxy's most reliable partner. They never fought back. They never demanded too much. They accepted every unfair treaty, every broken promise, every insult. The galaxy had grown comfortable with human cooperation. But now Velos wondered if they had been looking at humanity the wrong way. The humans had not been weak. They had been waiting. Far away, aboard a transport ship leaving coalition space, Dr. Hannah Choi watched the stars pass by. She was a small woman with tired eyes and a sharp mind. She had spent 30 years studying alien politics. She knew every secret, every lie, every dirty deal the council had ever made. And she had been preparing for this moment since she was young. Her tablet showed ports from Earth. The hidden fleets were moving into position. The defense networks were coming online. 50 years of secret preparation were finally being revealed. Humanity had built an army in the shadows, and the galaxy had never noticed. Hannah smiled to herself. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had waited a very long time for justice. Her communicator buzzed. It was Admiral Tai-Ho Kong, the commander of Earth's military. His voice was calm and steady. The Council will send envoys soon. They will beg us to come back to the table. And what will we tell them? Hannah asked. Nothing, Tai-Ho replied. We will tell them nothing at all. The line went dead. Hannah leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. Outside, the stars continued to shine, cold and distant. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. Humanity was done talking in the council chamber. Elos held the data chip in his hand. Such a small thing, such a simple message. But it had changed everything. He thought about all the times the council had dismissed human concerns. All the times they had laughed at human requests. All the times they had treated humanity like a minor inconvenience. He had made a terrible mistake. They all had. And now, for the first time in his long life, High Arbiter Velos was afraid. The orbital station called Horizon's Edge hung above the blue curve of Earth. It was massive. It's built from steel and hope, designed to be humanity's first line of defense. For decades, the galaxy believed it was just a research station. They were wrong. Admiral Tai-Ho Kong stood in the command center, his hands clasped behind his back. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and a face carved by years of patience. Around him, holographic displays showed the position of every ship in human space. 3,000 warships, hidden for generations in asteroid fields and gas giant atmospheres, were now moving into formation. Captain Minho Lee approached him with a tablet. Minho was younger, in his 30s, with sharp eyes and quick movements. He commanded the flagship Unyielding, the most powerful vessel in the human fleet. Admiral, the Council has sent another envoy. That makes 17 in 2 weeks. Tai-Ho did not turn around. And same message as before. They demand we return to negotiations. They say there will be consequences if we refuse. Consequences. Tai-Ho repeated the word like it was a joke. Tell them nothing. Do not respond. Minho nodded and walked away. He had served under Tai-Ho for 10 years. He had never seen the Admiral afraid, and he was not afraid now. If anything, the old man seemed calm, almost peaceful. On the bridge of the Unyielding, Lieutenant Jihoshin sat at his tactical station. He was young, barely 25, but he had trained his whole life for this moment. His father had been a soldier. His grandfather, too. 3 generations of his family had prepared for the day. Humanity would finally stand up. Jiho studied the enemy fleet positions on his screen. The coalition was gathering ships at the border of human space. 8 species had contributed vessels. It was the largest military force the galaxy had ever assembled. And yet, looking at their formations, Jiho felt no fear. They have no idea what they are doing, he muttered to himself. The alien commanders were arranging their ships in traditional patterns, the same patterns they had used for thousands of years. They expected humanity to see their numbers and surrender. They did not understand that humans had invented new ways of war, ways the galaxy had never imagined. Far from the military preparations, in a quiet room on the station, Ambassador Yuna Park sat alone. Her work was mostly done. She had delivered the message. She had walked away from everything she had built over 30 years of diplomatic service, and she did not regret it. Her communicator lit up with an incoming message. The sender was listed as unknown, but Yuna recognized the signal pattern. It was from Coalition Space. Someone was trying to reach her through back channels. She accepted the call. A young face appeared on the screen. It was Envoy Myra, a junior diplomat from the Sarati homeworld. She had large silver eyes and a nervous expression. Yuna remembered her from council meetings. Mira had always been kind, always willing to listen. She was different from the others. Ambassador Park, Myra said, her voice trembling. Please, I need to understand. Why is this happening? Yuna looked at the young alien for a long moment. She could have ignored the call. She could have said nothing. But something in Mira's eyes reminded her of herself. Many years ago, young, hopeful, believing that words could solve everything. You want to know why? Yuna said. I will tell you. She leaned forward, her voice calm and steady. For 300 years, humanity came to the council with open hands. We asked for fair treatment. We asked for respect. We asked for simple things that any species deserves. And every time, the council laughed at us. Every time, they gave us less than we asked for and expected us to be grateful. Mira opened her mouth to speak, but Yuna continued. Your council used our colonies as buffer zones against your enemies. Your merchants cheated our traders. Your military tested weapons on our outer worlds and called it accidents. We documented everything, Mira. Every broken promise. Every lie. Every insult. We have records going back 3 centuries. The young envoy's face went pale. I did not know, of course you did not know. Your leaders hid it from you. They told you humans were happy. They told you we were grateful for the council's protection. But we were never protected. We were used. Yuna's eyes hardened. Humanity is patient, Mira. We waited because we were not ready. We smiled because we needed time. We accepted your insults because our children were not yet strong enough to fight. But now they are grown. Now we have ships and weapons and soldiers who have trained their whole lives for this moment. Myra's voice was barely a whisper. What do you want from us? Yuna leaned back. For a moment, something like sadness crossed her face. That is the part you do not understand. We want nothing from you anymore. We are not negotiating because there is nothing you have that we need. Your council is not offering us freedom. We are taking it. And that is what terrifies you. The call ended. Mira sat in her quarters on Station Apex, staring at the blank screen. Her hands were shaking. She had always believed that diplomacy could solve any problem, that words were more powerful than weapons. But now she understood something terrible. Words only matter when both sides are willing to listen. And humanity had stopped listening a long time ago. Back on the Unyielding. Captain Minho Lee walked through the corridors of his ship. The crew moved with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no fear. They had trained for years preparing for a war they hoped would never come. But now that it was here, they were ready. He stopped at a window and looked out at the stars. Earth hung below, beautiful and blue. His home. His family was down there, along with 8 billion other people, all of them trusting him to protect them. Minho touched the glass with his fingertips. We did not start this, he said quietly, but we will finish it. Admiral Taiho Kong received a final message from the coalition that night. It was from Counselor Thane himself. The massive Orvian threatened destruction. He promised to burn human worlds until they begged for mercy. Taiho read the message once, then deleted it. He felt no anger, no fear, only a cold certainty. The coalition did not understand what was coming. They still believed they were dealing with the old humanity, the quiet humans, the patient humans, the humans who always smiled and nodded and accepted their fate. They were about to meet a different kind of human. The emergency session of the Galaxy Council began at midnight. Every seat was filled. Every delegate looked tired and afraid. The Grand Chamber that had once felt like a symbol of power now felt like a cage. High Arbiter Velos stood at the center. His silver robes wrinkled and his eyes dark with worry. He had not slept in 3 days. None of them had. The reports coming in from across the galaxy grew worse by the hour. The agricultural worlds, a delegate from the Kathrani shouted, humans operated 70% of our food production systems. Without them, we face famine within 2 years. Another voice rose from the crowd. Our station networks are failing. Human engineers maintained the power cores. We do not have enough trained workers to replace them. Trade routes are collapsing. Human merchant ships carried 40% of all cargo in coalition space. Our economy cannot survive this. Velos listened to the chaos around him. He had spent 200 years building the Council into the most powerful organization in the galaxy, and in 3 weeks, one species had brought it to its knees. Not with weapons, not with threats. Just by leaving, he finally understood what humanity had done. They had made themselves essential. They had placed themselves at the heart of every system, every network, every process that kept the galaxy running, and the Council, in its arrogance, had never noticed. They had been too busy looking down at humans to see what was happening right in front of them. Counselor. Thane pushed his way to the center platform. The massive Orvian was angrier than ever. Enough of this crying, he roared. We are warriors. We do not beg. We take what we need. Velos raised a hand. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting we remind the humans of their place. They have forgotten that we are the dominant powers of this galaxy. We must show them force. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some delegates nodded. Others looked uncertain. Velos felt his heart sink. He knew where this was going. Commander Brick stepped forward. The Kathrani military leader had been waiting for this moment. I have already begun preparations, he said. A fleet is gathering at the edge of human space. The largest fleet in galactic history. 8,000 warships from 12 species. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates cheered. Others argued against military action. But Brix continued speaking, his voice cutting through the noise. The humans have 3,000 ships at most. They cannot match our numbers. When they see our fleet approaching, they will realize their mistake. They will come back to the table and beg for mercy. And this time, we will not be so generous with the terms, Velos wanted to argue. He wanted to remind them that humanity had proven surprisingly capable in the past. But he looked around the chamber and saw that the decision had already been made. The Council was scared, and scared beings often made dangerous choices. Far away. In a secure room aboard Horizon's Edge, Dr. Hannah Choi watched the Council's emergency session on a secret feed. Humanity had placed operatives in every major government decades ago. They heard everything. They knew everything. Hannah smiled as she watched Brix outline his military strategy. The alien commander was showing holograms of fleet formations and attack patterns. He believed his plan was secret. He did not know that Hannah had read it 3 days before he presented it. She picked up her communicator and called Admiral Taiho Kong. They are sending the fleet. 8,000 ships, single formation, through the Karith Passage. Taiho's voice was calm. When? 2 weeks? They want to make a show of force. Big and impressive. They expect us to surrender at the site. There was a pause on the line. Then Taiho laughed. It was a soft laugh, without any joy in it. They really do not understand us at all. No, Hannah agreed. They never have. She ended the call and turned back to her screens. The intelligence reports showed everything. Coalition ship positions, supply lines, communication codes. Humanity had spent a century preparing for this moment. They knew the enemy better than the enemy knew themselves. On the bridge of the Unyielding, Captain Minho Lee gathered his senior officers for a briefing. Lieutenant Ji Ho Shin stood at the tactical display, pointing to a map of the Karith Passage. This is where they will come, Ji Ho said. It is the only route large enough for a fleet that size. The passage is narrow, about 2 light-hours wide, perfect for a trap. Minho nodded. What do we have in place? Everything. Ji Ho zoomed in on the map, revealing thousands of small dots hidden among the asteroids. For the past 100 years, our mining operations in this sector were not just mining. We have been placing charges, antimatter devices hidden inside hollowed-out rocks. The entire passage is a weapon. The officers around the table exchanged glances. This was not a battle plan. It was an execution. Minho looked at the display for a long moment. He thought about the aliens who would die in that passage. Thousands of them, maybe more. Some of them were probably good beings who had never hurt anyone. But he also thought about the human colonies that had been abandoned by the Council. The human workers who had been treated like slaves. The human children who had grown up believing they were less than everyone else. "Prepare the fleet," he said finally. "We move in 3 days." Back on Station Apex Envoy, Mira sat alone in her quarters. She had tried to warn the council about what Ambassador Park had told her. She had begged them to reconsider military action, but no one listened. They called her young and naive. They said she did not understand how the galaxy worked, but Mira understood more than they knew. She had seen something in Unipark's eyes during their conversation. Not anger, not hatred, something worse, certainty. The humans were not afraid of the Coalition fleet. They were not panicking or scrambling to prepare. They had known this would happen. They had planned for it, and whatever trap they had set. Mira was sure the Coalition was walking straight into it. She tried one more time to send a warning. She wrote a message explaining her fears and sent it to every council member she could reach. But the responses were all the same. Dismissal, mockery, confidence. The Serati delegate told her to stop worrying. The humans were not capable of defeating the Coalition. Everyone knew that Mira deleted the responses and stared out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, a trap was waiting, and no one would believe her until it was too late. High Arbiter Velos stood alone in his chambers that night. He held a glass of Serati wine, but did not drink. His mind kept returning to the same question. What had they missed? For 300 years, humanity had been right in front of them, smiling, cooperating, accepting every insult. And the whole time they had been building something in the shadows. Ships, weapons, plans. Velos set down his glass. He had a terrible feeling that the galaxy was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. And by the time they understood, it would already be over. The Karath Passage was beautiful in its own way. A river of asteroids flowing through empty space, stretching for light hours in every direction. Ancient rocks tumbled slowly in the darkness, some as small as houses, others as large as moons. For centuries, this passage had been the only route between Coalition space and human territory. It was a natural highway through the stars. Today would become a graveyard. The Coalition fleet arrived at the edge of the passage in perfect formation. 8,000 warships from 12 different species, arranged in neat lines that stretched across the void. Commander Brix stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Fury, watching the display with satisfaction. "Magnificent," he said to his officers. "The largest fleet ever assembled. The humans will surrender the moment they see us." His second-in-command, a younger Kathrani named Voss, studied the sensor readings. "Sir, I am not detecting any human ships in the passage. The route appears empty." Brix laughed. "Of course it is empty. They have fled in fear. They know they cannot defeat us." He raised his voice so the entire bridge could hear. "All ships, advance. We will proceed directly through the passage and establish a blockade around Earth. By tomorrow, the humans will be begging for mercy." The fleet moved forward. Thousands of engines fired in sequence, pushing the massive formation into the asteroid field. The ships moved slowly, carefully navigating around the tumbling rocks. Brix watched with pride as his armada filled the passage from edge to edge. He did not notice the small sensor anomaly that flickered across his screen. None of his officers noticed either. It was too small to matter. Just a slight energy reading from one of the asteroids, probably leftover radiation from old mining operations, 30 light minutes away. Hidden among a cluster of dead rocks, the unyielding waited in silence. Captain Minho Lee sat in his command chair, watching the enemy fleet on his display. 200 human ships surrounded him, all running on minimal power, invisible to Coalition sensors. Lieutenant Jiho Shin counted down from his tactical station. "Coalition fleet has reached the center of the passage. All ships are within the kill zone."
Ow.
Minho felt his heart beating faster. This was it. The moment his family had prepared for across 3 generations. He thought about his grandfather, who had died believing humanity would always be weak. He thought about his father, who had spent his life hiding weapons in asteroids. And he thought about his own children, sleeping peacefully on Earth, trusting him to protect their future. "Admiral Kong," he said into his communicator, "Coalition fleet is in position. Awaiting your order?" Taiho Kong's voice came back immediately, calm and steady as always. Proceed, Minho nodded to Jiho. Light him up. Jiho pressed a single button on his console. For a moment, nothing happened. The Coalition fleet continued its slow advance. Commander Brix was in the middle of dictating a victory message to send to the Galaxy Council. Then the asteroids began to glow. Thousands of rocks across. The passage suddenly lit up with brilliant white light. The energy readings on Coalition sensors went from 0 to impossible in less than a second. Officers shouted in confusion. Alarms screamed across every ship. What is happening? Brix roared. Report. His second-in-command stared at his screen in horror. The asteroids. They are not asteroids. They are bombs. Antimatter charges. Thousands of them. Brix opened his mouth to give an order, but it was already too late. The explosions began at the center of the passage and rippled outward in every direction. Pure white fire consumed everything it touched. Ships that had survived centuries of warfare vanished in microseconds. The carefully arranged formation became chaos as captains tried to flee in every direction at once. But there was nowhere to go. The passage was narrow, and the explosions were everywhere. 3,000 Coalition ships died in the first 30 seconds. Another 1,000 were crippled by the shockwaves. The survivors scattered like frightened animals, crashing into asteroids and each other in their desperate attempts to escape. On the bridge of the Eternal Fury, Commander Brix watched his fleet die. His flagship had been near the edge of the formation, far enough from the center to survive the initial blast. But half his systems were offline, and fires burned in 3 sections of the ship. Damage report, he managed to say. 40% of the fleet destroyed, Voss replied, his voice shaking. Another 20% heavily damaged? Enemy ships are emerging from hiding positions throughout the passage. Brix looked at his display. Through the smoke and debris, he could see them. Human warships, sleek and deadly, rising from their hiding places among the asteroids. 200 vessels against what remained of his 8,000. And they were not attacking. They were watching. The unyielding move to the front of the human formation. Captain Minho Lee activated the broadcast system, sending a message on all frequencies so every surviving Coalition ship would hear. This was a warning, he said, his voice carrying across the void. You entered our space without permission? You came to threaten our people. And now you have seen what we can do. He paused, letting the words sink in. We fired no weapons today. We did not need to. The trap you walked into was prepared 100 years ago by people who knew this moment would come. You called us weak. You called us cowards. But we were never weak. We were patient. On the Eternal Fury, Commander Brix listened in stunned silence. Around him, officers wept openly. 3,000 ships. Hundreds of thousands of crew members, gone in less than a minute. Minho's message continued. Return to your masters. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humanity is no longer asking for respect. We are demanding it. And the next time anyone enters our space without invitation, we will not stop at a warning. The human ships began to withdraw, pulling back toward Earth space. They moved slowly, almost casually, as if the burning wreckage around them meant nothing. As if destroying the largest fleet in galactic history was just a minor inconvenience. Brix watched them go. His hands were shaking. In his long military career, he had never experienced defeat. He had never even imagined it. The Coalition had always been the strongest power in the galaxy. They had always won. But today he understood something terrible. The Coalition had never truly been tested. For thousands of years, they had fought against species who were already beaten. They had bullied and threatened and conquered because no one could stop them. Humanity had stopped them. Sir Voss said quietly, "What do we do now?" Brix did not answer. He stared at the display, watching the human ships disappear into the distance. He thought about his fleet, now reduced to scattered survivors. He thought about the message he would have to send to the Galaxy Council, and he thought about what would happen the next. Time someone underestimated humanity, the passage fell silent. Debris floated through the void, the remains of ships that had once been the pride of 12 different species. Fires burned on damaged vessels. Rescue signals beeped uselessly in the darkness. Far away on Earth, Admiral Taiho Kang received the confirmation. The demonstration had been successful. Not a single human ship had been scratched. The message had been delivered. He turned to Dr. Hannah Choi, who stood beside him in the command center. "It is done," Hannah nodded slowly. There was no celebration in her eyes. No joy. Just the quiet satisfaction of a promise kept. Now they know. "Yes," Taiho agreed. "Now they know." Outside the windows of Horizon's Edge, Earth continued its slow rotation. Blue oceans and green continents glowed in the light of the sun. 8 billion people went about their lives, most of them unaware that the galaxy had just changed forever. Humanity was no longer afraid. 6 months had passed since the Kareth passage. The galaxy was not the same. The Galaxy Council still existed, but only in name. Half its members had withdrawn, terrified of saying anything that might anger humanity. The Orvian Empire, once the most powerful military force in known space, had collapsed into civil war. Without human mediators to keep the peace between rival factions, old hatreds had exploded into violence. 3 of their core worlds were burning, trade routes remained broken. Food shortages spread across dozens of systems. Species that had lived in comfort for centuries suddenly found themselves struggling to survive. And everywhere the same question echoed: how did we let this happen? High Arbiter Velos sat alone in his chambers on Station Apex. The station had been declared neutral territory now, no longer under Council control. It was one of the few places in the galaxy where all species could still meet safely. Velos had requested a private audience with humanity. After weeks of waiting, they had finally agreed, not on the station. On Earth, the shuttle descended through white clouds toward a peninsula on the eastern edge of a large continent. Velos pressed his face against the window like a child. He had never visited Earth before. In 3 centuries of dealing with humans, he had never thought to come to their homeworld. Why would he? Humans had always come to him. Now he understood how foolish that had been. The shuttle landed in a city called Busan. Velos stepped onto solid ground and looked around in wonder. The city was beautiful. Tall buildings rose toward the sky, their surfaces gleaming with glass and steel. Trees lined the streets, their branches heavy with pink blossoms. The air smelled of salt from the nearby sea, and everywhere there were humans, walking, talking, laughing, living their lives without any sign of fear or worry. They barely glanced at the alien walking among them. To them, he was simply irrelevant. That hurt more than Velos expected. A human guide led him through the city to a garden on a hillside. Cherry trees surrounded the space, their petals falling like snow in the gentle wind. A single bench sat at the center. Overlooking the ocean below, Admiral Taiho Kang was waiting for him. The old human rose as Velos approached. He wore simple clothes, nothing like the elaborate uniforms the council members favored. His face was weathered by age, but his eyes were sharp and clear. "Hi, Arbiter," Taiho said. "Thank you for coming," Velos bowed slightly. The motion felt strange. He could not remember the last time he had bowed to anyone. "Thank you for receiving me." They sat together on the bench, looking out at the sea. For a long moment, neither spoke. Cherry blossoms drifted between them. Finally, Velos asked the question that had haunted him for months. "Why did you wait so long?" Taiho considered the question carefully. "Because we were not ready. But you were building ships, weapons. You had the power to challenge us decades ago. Power is not enough." Taiho picked up a fallen blossom and turned it over in his fingers. "When my grandfather was young, humanity was weak. Truly weak. We had just discovered space travel. We had no defenses, no fleet, nothing. The council welcomed us with open arms and smiling faces. And then they began to use us." Velos said nothing. He could not argue with the truth. My grandfather saw what was happening. He knew that if humanity fought back too soon, we would be destroyed. So he made a choice. He would smile. He would cooperate. He would accept every insult and every unfair treaty, but he would also prepare. Taiho looked at Velos with steady eyes. He passed that mission to my father. My father passed it to me. 3 generations of our family, and thousands of families like ours, all working toward the same goal. Not revenge. Something more important. What? Velos asked. Freedom for our children. The word hung in the air between them. Freedom. Such a simple concept. And yet Velos realized the council had never truly offered it to anyone. They had offered protection, trade, membership, but always with conditions. Always with strings attached. Humanity had cut those strings. The galaxy is suffering, Velos said quietly. Without your people, systems are failing. Species are starving. Wars are breaking out everywhere. Taiho nodded. I know. We need your help. I know that too. Taiho set down the blossom and looked at Velos directly. But help is something that must be earned. For 300 years, the Council took from us without asking. Now, any species that wants our cooperation must come to us as equals, not as masters, not as conquerors, equals. Velos felt a strange sensation in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it as hope. Is peace possible? Peace is always possible, but not the kind of peace you are used to. Taiho stood and walked to the edge of the garden, looking down at the city below. Your council built an empire on the idea that some species are better than others. That idea is over. Any new peace must be built on something different. What do you propose? Nothing. Taiho turned back to face him. We are not proposing anything. We are waiting. When the galaxy is ready to treat us as equals, we will be here. Until then, we will protect our borders and live our lives. The choice belongs to you and your people. Velos rose from the bench. His legs felt unsteady. In 200 years of leading the council, he had never been in a negotiation like this. Usually, he held all the power. Usually, the other side had no choice but to accept his terms. But humanity had made a choice. They had chosen to walk away from a table where they were not respected. They had chosen freedom over compromise. And now, the galaxy had to decide whether to join them or face the consequences alone. I will speak to the remaining council members, Velos said. I will tell them what you have told me. Taiho nodded. That is all we ask. Velos began to walk away, then stopped. He turned back one last time. Admiral, may I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you hate us? After everything we did to your people, do you hate us? Taiho thought about the question for a long moment. Cherry blossoms continued to fall around them, soft and silent. Hatred requires energy. We spent all our energy on something more useful. He smiled slightly, the first smile Velos had ever seen from him. We spent it on becoming something you could not ignore. The shuttle carried Velos back to Station Apex as the sun set over Earth. He watched the blue planet shrink in his window. Thinking about everything he had seen and heard, Ambassador Una Park was waiting for him at the landing bay. She looked different now. More relaxed, at peace. The tension that had always marked her features was gone. Did you find what you were looking for? She asked. Velos considered the question. I found something I did not expect. What is that? He looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. She was not a servant or a subordinate. She was a representative of a species that had outgrown the galaxy's small expectations. I found that the galaxy needs to grow up, he said, and humanity's going to show us how. Una nodded slowly. There was no triumph in her expression. No satisfaction. Just quiet acceptance. Far above them, through the windows of the station, human ships patrolled the stars. They moved freely now, going wherever they pleased. No one tried to stop them. No one dared. 300 years of patience had led to this moment. Humanity had finally stopped asking for a seat at the table. They had built their own.